Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America on WSGW. Now, here is your host, Kareem Bowen.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America. I guess my goal this week is to see how fast I can get all those words out without stammering over my tongue. And I think that I accomplished that. Well, we're in the studio today for another edition. I have with me my main man to my right, Mr. Mark Bassett. I saw
that's doctor to you,
Dr. Bassett. Are you a doctor?
a PhD doctor.
Oh, the doctor is in the house. I saw Jonathan try it. He thought I was going to come to him first. I decided to change it up. But you also will see out there, I don't know if you see him or not, but he's here, Mr. Jonathan.
Hello.
John B in the place to be. John, what happened to your
John
camera?
a camera? Yeah, I'll go out and buy John a camera here.
What happened, John? I thought you had a camera.
We've got one. I just got here late and didn't have time to set it.
All right. Okay.
Hey, so this is Super Bowl weekend. And so I do want to talk about that because, and I know Jonathan hates when I put current events and stuff, but we got to talk about it. It's the Super Bowl, right? So what are we doing? First of all, do we have a preference of which team is going to win?
I'm not a big NFL fan. Let me start there.
It's a sport. What do we think, Jonathan, right?
I think football's boring.
Oh, my God.
I follow specific players. I'm a big Notre Dame fan, obviously. So the Chiefs have a Notre Dame player who's one of their linebackers. But I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I've bought into the conspiracy theory that the refs, the league, are trying to facilitate the Chiefs to win, and so I want the Eagles. So,
you know, there's been a lot of conversation about that.
I know. I've seen the statistics. I've seen all these crazy replays during the playoffs of you can't be serious.
Yeah. So and Jonathan, you are just completely checked out.
Yep.
So what do you do on Super Bowl Sunday when everybody else is talking about Super Bowl? They come back in, they're talking around the water cooler, and you just kind of just keep walking, I guess.
I'm playing Dungeons and Dragons Sunday night.
Dungeons and Dragons.
That's a game I haven't heard for a while. That's still going on?
Oh, it's big now.
Big? Okay.
Yeah.
It's making a rebirth.
It's big?
Yeah.
All right.
Do you dress up, Jonathan? Do you have a no? Okay.
No, but I do the voices.
Okay. What exact? I never understood what Dungeons and Dragons was.
We can talk about the Super Bowl. We don't need to talk about
No, I do want to know what
it's a role-playing game, kind of
yeah.
Like medieval?
Yeah. Mostly. Yeah. Like think Lord of the Rings, except you and your friends play the heroes and make the decisions that shape the story.
And back to football. No, just it's blowing up again, Jonathan. Was this a big thing before, Mark?
It was. I forget when
it
first came out. But there was a bit of controversy around it when it first came out. Around this is satanic or this is kind of like unreligious. Now, and it was a certain kind of stereotypical group of people that play Dungeon Dragon. Kind of out a bit
black people.
No, I don't know about. No, basically, kind of a bit of social outcast kind of situation.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Clearly, that's not the case anymore with Jonathan.
I was going to say, Jonathan, how has that changed since then?
It's pretty much the same.
So the Super Bowl for us is like a big deal. So there are several parties that will be going on. I'll be spending time at one Super Bowl party for the first half of the game. And then I'll be transitioning to the second Super Bowl party for the second half of the game. I am not a Chiefs fan. My mother is a mad Chiefs fan. Some relatives are crazy about the Chiefs. However, I will be rooting for the underdog. As Mark said, I am always an underdog kind of guy. And Jalen Hurts, I think it's pretty cool. I would love to see him kind of stop this three-peat. I think seeing two of the top quarterbacks go head to head in the league, which is interesting to me. That's an interesting point. And because, for a long time, I remember when I was growing up, black kids didn't play quarterback,
Doug Williams, first black quarterback.
When I was growing up, he was an older guy, but he was like
the first black quarterback to win a Super Bowl
with the
Washington Redskins at the time.
The Redskins at the time. Now they're Washington
Commanders.
Yeah. Is it the same team?
Yes.
Still in the same city.
Why are you looking at me asking this question?
Yes.
Because you're my research team. You're the research department.
Yes, it is. I think they're playing in a different stadium, obviously, but it's the same team. So,
okay. So I do remember Doug Williams. I was a kid when Doug Williams was playing, but I do remember like the history of him being the first quarterback. Did he win a Super Bowl?
He did. He was the first black quarterback to win a Super Bowl.
That's what I thought.
I think he went to, was it Grambling or I forget which?
Oh, he went to an HBCU.
He went to an HBCU.
Look at Mark coming in clutch with the HBCU history. So I think that that's really cool because that was just a position growing up. You know, we were always fast and we could play receiver and halfback, fullback. But, you know, quarterbacks were just kind of always thought to be the good looking white guy. And when you look throughout the NFL, it's kind of what we see as are there like quarterbacks in there that look like, I don't know how to say it. I don't want to say the word UGLY, but Jonathan's looking up ugly quarterbacks. But it's
not good looking quarterbacks.
Not good looking quarterbacks.
Not handsome. Not classically good looking.
Not classically handsome good quarterbacks.
Oh, I'm sure there are. I don't know who they are, but I'm sure there are.
If we have to mention your name, please, we're sorry, but you got to blame it on genetics.
Well, it's all a matter of perspective, right? Somebody's good looking.
Yeah,
I mean, bad looking.
You know, I'm talking about commercial ready, TV ready.
Yeah.
And Jonathan came up with
all of these are just like historical, like they're going back decades. So I'm not
okay. Yeah, we're and plus we don't want to name somebody as the first ugly quarterback. It's not very nice.
It's something they do at the combine. How commercially viable is this guy? And what are his looks?
Well, wait a minute. There is one. I haven't, to be honest, and I got to be 1,000%. I have not watched as much football as I normally would in a football season. Probably for the past couple of years, probably because there's other stuff to do. I've not been interested, but there's one guy that I keep seeing on social media. He's got a lot of hair. He doesn't wear shoes. Or no. He's a quarterback. He is a quarterback. And they're just talking about how beautiful he is. I guess he's this, but dark hair, kind of looks like a Grecian god.
Oh, you're talking about Sam Hartman, probably.
Pull him up, Jonathan. Let's see.
He was the quarterback at Notre Dame 2 years ago. He's a free agent. He was a undrafted free agent with the Commanders.
Hollins?
Sam Hartman. Here, I'll pull him up.
Sam Hartman. So yeah, but anyways, it's funny because he keeps coming up on social media timelines, you know, him doing drills and everyone looking at his hair bounce around, and that's him.
Yeah, Sam Hartman. I actually, on my way out to Southern California last summer, sat next to Sam Hartman on the flight out to John Wayne Airport.
You hear this, Jonathan? We were in seat 39F, and he's sitting next to Sam Hartman. Really?
Yeah.
Did you have conversation with him?
I basically, when he came and sat next to me, I said, I hate to do this to you, but are you Sam Hartman? And he goes, yeah, I am. So he was calling me sir. And I just said, hey, I'm a Notre Dame grad, huge Notre Dame fan. So real pleasure to meet you. Maybe another sentence or two. I left him alone for the whole flight.
Mark.
Then when he landed, I just said, hey, out of curiosity, what are you doing out here? He goes, well, I'm going to go to a quarterback coach. I'm going to a quarterback coach. He named where he was meeting them. And, you know, he was, he was an undrafted free agent. He's with the Commanders. He's been in and out of the roster, I think.
So, Mr. Hartman, I just want you and every other athlete to know out there that if you're sitting next to me on a plane by the toilet, there's no way you're going to go the whole time and we're not going to have conversation.
I sat next to John Goodman on a flight from LA to New York.
And what was your conversation?
I didn't say a word to the man. I just left him alone. God. Again, I try to respect, these guys just want to be left alone.
I'm right there with you.
Yeah. I'm not going to.
They want to just be treated like regular people.
No, I think.
You talk to other people if you sit next to them on the plane?
Not really, no. I leave them alone because I want to be left alone.
Oh, my gosh. Jonathan's like, that's right.
I put on my noise canceling headphones. Turn on my music.
If I'm not asleep, because usually I'm asleep by the time the plane takes off. If I'm not asleep, I'm talking to someone on that plane. And if they're interesting, they're a famous person, guess what? You're going to have to deal with me for however long the duration of that flight is, because we're going to be talking until you get up. I guess. I do good. I'm not going to be too pushy, but I'm going to get me a selfie. I'm going to talk about.
I would never do that.
Oh my gosh.
Never.
I might ask for a picture.
That's what they're celebrities. They're used to this. This is what they get paid.
But only after I've left them alone for a 5-hour flight.
Jonathan's going to be sitting there looking at him. By the time you ask me, they're like, "Who is this weirdo?"
Well, I did a double take on John Goodman, and I was like, and then he and I locked eyes for a second. And then I'm going to leave him alone.
He was like, oh, here he goes. He's getting ready to get started.
We're kind of next to each other at baggage claim as well. And again, we were looking at each other, and I just
you don't say anything?
I just left the guy alone. Yeah.
Mark, the world is a really disappointed place now. But anyways, we have a great show that we want to get to. And Jonathan says, Kareem, you talk too much at the beginning of the show. I don't think I talk very much at all. And I bet most of my viewers would agree with me out there. Mark, you agree, right?
Oh, for sure. The more you talk, the less I have to.
But today, I want to have a conversation. First of all, let's do some housekeeping. I want to give a shout out to everyone who listens out there in WSGW, whether it's 100.5 or 790 AM. We certainly want to thank you for tuning in. And then also a shout out to Joliet, Illinois, WJOL. No numbers, just letters. WJOL. Thank you for tuning in. If you're tuning in, shoot us a message every now and then. Let us know that you're out there and that you're listening. So we want to thank those individuals and everyone that watches us on social media platforms. I think that we hit all of them: X, Instagram, YouTube, the whole thingamajiggy out there.
We're mostly on podcasting platforms.
Okay, or that those are great as well.
Yeah.
Which our podcasting platform, which we never talk about, is
Spotify. We're on Audible. We're on Apple Podcasts, and you can find all of our episodes at wsgw.com and click on podcasts.
So you can go on the Apple app and find the show.
Yes.
Okay. I'll have to try that
sometime. Yeah, we
I
never
didn't
knew
know
that.
actually. I didn't know that.
We would be carrying ourselves around in our phone.
You got to be doing a better job of promoting your show, man.
Hey, check me out on Apple, iPod, whatever. What is it? Apple
Podcasts. It's Apple Music, I think.
Apple Music.
Apple Music.
Don't look it up right now. It'll technically go live on Monday.
Okay. So it's not there yet.
By the time this airs, it'll basically be there. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So
well,
I can't
check us
today.
out wherever you get your podcast. We are out there sliming around in the distance.
I just tell people to go on Facebook and look up United Shades of Gray, and they can watch it. So that's the easiest thing for
then
old
they
people.
Get to see us. I think the half of the show is there's a show that you hear on the air, but then I think there's a show that you get to see. And I think the one that you get to see, especially when Mark makes me laugh about the crazy things that he says, Jonathan and his beautiful boyish charm. I think these are the things that you want to see. So check us out, yes, on those platforms, but also check us out on social media platforms so you can be involved and you can see what's going on. All right. So all of that aside, shout out. I'm rooting on, Jalen Hurts. Let's make it happen. And I'm excited. What I love about Jalen Hurts, and I'm going to move to the next thing, I promise, is that Hurts is an amazing. First of all, he has a female agent who's doing amazing. Had an opportunity to meet her this past summer at the Dow Championship. She came in.
Oh, okay. Why was she there?
She was there just talking. They were talking about women in business. Yeah, she was a speaker. It was really kind of cool to meet her. And then also his mother also manages a lot of his stuff. And I think that is just he's a great guy and seems to be a pretty wise kid. So young man, excuse me, because he's not a kid. But we want to talk today. I want to talk about moving forward as America turns back on equity. Now, as Jonathan said on last week, that makes some assumptions, and I am making assumption with that title. As we look at everything that's going on, I saw something this morning that got me going. And what it was is I was looking at an announcement on some platform. I can't remember what I was watching on television. So it was a TV station, and they were talking about Boy Scouts of America. Jonathan, were you a Boy Scout? You look like you would have been a Boy Scout.
I was a Cub Scout and a Weeblo, but not a Boy Scout.
Okay, so what's the difference?
It's just different age groups. Young kids up to a certain age are Cub Scouts. Then as you get a little older, you're a Weeblo. And then if you keep going and you're a little older, you're a Boy Scout.
Well, my mama was like, boy, no, you ain't going camping with no, I don't know the men that's taking you camping. So we were Boy Scouts. So we went to the initial meeting and they're like, no, you're not doing that. So anyways, I was watching this news outlet and they were talking about how Boy Scouts of America was rebranding their name. And their new name would be America Scouts, or what does it say? Scouts of America, Scouting America.
I missed all of this, to be honest with you.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Scouting America. And the reason that they were changing this was because of the new presence of young women that were involved. And I thought young women were So
They
see,
have
I'm
Girl
really confused.
Scouts.
I thought they were Girl Scouts and Brownies.
There are. It was the analog to Boy Scouts. So young girls would do stuff together and young boys would do stuff together.
So this
I don't
was
know
the
why you have to
question.
integrate that, to be perfectly honest.
So are there still Girl Scouts?
I would assume. I don't
Yes.
know. Yes. I know because they knock on my door once a year and sell cookies. So
They never knock on my door, but if you would, I can give you my address because those Thin Mints are the bomb. Okay, so wait a minute. So there is yet Girl Scouts.
Yes.
And there's still Boy Scouts.
I don't.
There's Scouting America now.
Well, I'm for all intents and purposes.
But girls are allowed to join Boy Scouts.
So what's the difference?
I didn't. Based on what you sent out, that's what it looks like.
So, no, girls are allowed to join.
Okay.
So I didn't know if that wasn't a thing before.
It wasn't. It was just boys in Boy Scouts. Girls weren't allowed.
So
I don't know if it was an expressly written rule. I don't know. But I never saw a girl in Boy Scouts, that's for sure. It would be a weird name to call it if you allowed girls in it.
I think they started allowing girls a few years ago, and now they're just changing the name to reflect that.
Okay.
And they still have Girl Scouts.
And
Yes.
Girl Scouts are still a thing, but boys aren't allowed in Girl Scouts.
So are they still going to change the name?
Of
Of Girl
what?
Scouts?
Yeah, why would
Yeah,
you?
why wouldn't it just be Scouts of America or
Because
Scouting
it's a
America?
totally
They're
different
two
organization.
different organizations.
They were
completely
always
different.
They were always two completely
Okay, now
different
that makes sense.
Yeah.
So they're not affiliated in terms of their organizational
No.
structure. Okay, so that makes sense. Okay, now we're back on track here. But anyways, I saw this conversation about them changing the name, and I thought it was really interesting because I was like, wow, well, here's an example of equality, because Boy Scouts is
And I would argue this is why you get people going DEI gone wrong.
No. Let me explain to you why.
All right.
Because there had this Boy Scouts of America. I don't understand which Boy Scouts I would assume was first. Girls have become to be a part of it collectively, because one thing I know about the Girl Scouts is that they aren't offered as in many places as Boy Scouts are. I remember that they were trying to get a chapter of Girl Scouts here in the Saginaw City community, and they were having a really hard time.
I think you just need to get a critical mass of people, adults,
That's what
to,
it is.
to do it, and enough girls to join it. You can have one.
Yeah, and I think that in some places where there's not one, we probably see girls wanting to be a part of the process. So I think that's kind of where this came from or stems from. But anyways, I saw, just this example. This is a difference between equity and equality. Them wanting to include and make sure that everybody had access to the Boy Scouts, and then also
I think this was forced on them. Is my belief is probably this was forced on them.
It's represented. I'll tell you, there was a lady that was talking, and she was not very happy about her past experiences because she was sharing about how when she was in the Scouts, she had to do like two
in
tests
the Girl Scouts
and Boy Scouts. When she was in Boy Scouts of America.
Okay.
When she was coming through the ranks of Boy Scouts in America, that girls had to do 2 of their Eagle tests or something like that. They had to do 2 Eagle tests versus the one that the boys were doing. And then there was all of these other things that she said that were keeping her from earning her badges. Now, I do know that those little patches and badges were very important. And they were often asked or kind of challenged when it came to the scouting trips, which I kind of understand because I would think most of the mentors in Boy Scouts would be men. And I don't know about you.
They weren't. Like when my youngest son was a Boy Scout, and there was a woman that helped with her husband. I think it was a husband and wife team.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so this is what this is about. So she's like, hey, there should be an opportunity for us to be able to do the things that other people are doing. And so they are changing the name to represent the fact that it's equal and everyone can come in.
So I just Googled it. Since 2017, girls have been allowed as Cub Scouts, and as of 2018, into the Boy Scouts. So it hasn't been that long.
So fairly recent.
Fairly recently.
Okay. And so we see this, and so there's a rebranding of the company to represent the fact that women are now a part of this system. And I have one thing when it comes to scouting, if people want to go out, and I don't really know what scouts do, but I just know that they used to go camping and they used to learn how to live off the land, and they would talk about different characteristics and quality. That's all I know about the scouts. Do you know anything more than that?
That's about as far as I know. Yeah.
Mark?
No.
You were
I joined as a young
brownie
kid.
boy. What did you say you
Cub
were?
Scout. Cub Scout.
I'm a brownie boy. You were a Cub Scout.
I was a Cub
Aren't
Scout.
they similar?
It was about you could win little things, awards for doing, learning how to do things. The big exciting thing was the Pinewood Derby. That was why, like, one of my sons joined for a few years. He wanted to do Pinewood Derby, which
Is
you
that
build
where
a
you
little
make a
cart,
derby, the cart?
car, and a small little cart, and you race it down the track. And
I did that once. We made a goat cart.
but these would be little cars.
No, we were.
You're talking about something else. Yeah.
Okay. Anyways, I think that this was, a great example of how we evolved. Now, what do you
I
like
would go like,
go ahead.
I guess I would push back of like, I mean, there's a Boy Scouts organization for young men. There's a Girl Scouts organization for young women. And I don't see any reason why there's a problem with, okay, we're just going to have young men, young boys in this group. And this is what we're going to teach them. And young women, if you want to learn the same thing, go ahead and do that in the Girl Scout. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, I don't think. And
no,
being kind of handedly forced to integrate. I don't know if that's the case here or not. I don't know enough about it.
Right.
And I think there's value in that
I do too.
as well, of being able to communicate with your peers of the same sex.
I don't disagree. I don't disagree with that. But however we may feel about it, this is an example of what I was saying of how we rebrand things to represent this new growing population of everyone being a part.
But I would argue this is a great example of what a lot of people would get upset about. Like, this has gone too far, that you can no longer have a young men's organization that's just for young men. And that's not, I just think you can. There's no reason you can't.
I think that if they're available, and I would agree with you, Mark.
Yeah.
But I think that if they're available, I think that having both available makes it good. But if there's one that's not missing, then there's nothing wrong. If a girl wants to do it, then let her become a part of it. And I think that was the spirit behind this move. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to get more into this conversation, talk real common adult stuff. Stay tuned.
You're listening to United Shades of Grey on WSGW.
All right, we're back with more United Shades of Grey. Well, right before the break, we were talking about, the changing of the names from Boy Scouts of America to Scouting America, and that, girls have been a part of this since 2017, 2018, we find out.
Girls could be, I was just glancing through it. They could have been, could be involved earlier, but not as full members. They were called explorers or something else. But full members, 2018.
It was probably like intentionally stepping stone into that.
Into the thing. So that was an example of what I call equality. Everyone can now join the Boy Scouts, or Scouting America. But then they went, and she was talking about how she was interested in working to restore, and them creating policies to restore badges that were denied before to the women and the girls that were a part of it, the girls that were part of it before, and what they were going to do to make sure that, that they were compensated for that time. And they've made sure that all of the requirements to get those badges have now been made equal for everybody to achieve. I thought that was very interesting, a very interesting announcement this morning, considering this whole DEI climate, anti-DEI climate that we find ourselves in. And it just got me kind of thinking, because I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and I was sharing with them. They were like, oh, DEI. I said, listen, DEI is what the 60s, 50s, and 60s and the 70s referred to as the civil rights movement. It's what became affirmative action in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And when that went down, it now has become diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think in my understanding of everything that has happened from the times of MLK, Rosa Parks to now, the mission is the same of all of those programs, has been. And so now they're just different names. And they said, well, why do you think they would change the names? And my personal opinion, I would love to hear what you guys have to say. I think that those names change based upon people's palate, their ability to digest the new name that's being utilized, even though the focus and premise may be very similar.
I disagree.
Okay.
So I think those civil rights, affirmative action, and DEI are three different things. One leads to another. Certainly,
mission.
I suppose
I think the
purpose
North
behind
Star
them.
of each of those is probably very similar.
Yeah.
What they're ultimately trying to achieve.
I would agree with that, but
That's
I think
that's
they are
the premise
three
that I'm
different
making.
causes with three different
Okay, how do you
goals.
see it?
Civil rights was absolutely about the governmental structure and the rights of Black people and all people in America to be equal under the law.
Okay.
Affirmative action was...
I think that's one part of civil rights, but go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Affirmative action was more of the integration, get Black people into the workplace, into schools, and that kind of led to the checkbox mentality, which we've talked about several times here. Probably isn't all that great.
Right.
And my understanding of DEI as it stands today is the allocation of resources to accommodate not the results of affirmative action, but to accommodate minorities in the workplace and in school and in life, I guess.
And to me, I just heard you say the same thing. I think that the focus, one was kind of breaking into a system where the system had not been moved into. We're moving into a new space, and so it's the civil rights movement. There are certain rights that we have, and when you talk about the equal protection or I'm thinking 14th Amendment. I'm thinking, what happened in 1968. 64, 68, and those were really just because they were breaking into new grounds. I see the continuation of this conversation when we move from what we call the civil rights movement to an affirmative action movement, being a continuation of the work because the work fell short.
To me, it's like an evolution.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
You have a North Star that you're trying to reach, and it's way out there in the distance, and it's the next step in it. That's a long journey and it takes a long time. And to me, civil rights was the first step in that journey.
Mm-hmm.
And once you get to that point in your journey, which is whatever, 10 steps along of a 100,000 step journey, you need to break the next barrier and have the next evolution and move towards your North Star. And that's become like affirmative action.
Right.
And then once that barrier is broken, then you have the next thing. And that's kind of my point of like fundamental change in a society and the way people think and the internal biases that takes generations. And to me, I'm obviously looking at it and coming at it from a different perspective than a Black man.
Really?
Yes, because I think we've come a long way. I know there's a lot of Black men or Black people in general that don't think we've come far enough, and we haven't, or come as far as we should. And I get that. I look at it and go, well, look where we were 50 years ago and look where we are now. And that, to me, that's a lot of progress.
Well, that's exactly my point on this whole conversation.
Yeah.
Is I think the mission is the same. And what you're thinking, the mission is the same.
Yeah.
But I think that, we see these, I think there has been a creation of a law that there was a image or a desire of what that law would happen. But then you see once it's implemented, how it's implemented determines if that law was effective. And so I think that they said that, this law was intended to do this.
And there's going to always be good things and things you didn't expect that are negative that come out of these laws.
Absolutely.
And
but
there's always an unintended consequence, negatively or positively, but no law is all good or all bad.
No, I mean, and I love how you framed how the laws were placed or implemented, and how culture played a large portion, a large part in what that looks like. But this is the thing that I want to say. I think that what's interesting with this is that when I look at this and I look at the things that we're being fought for, as we talk about how far we've come, we're fighting for the same things, decades later, 50 years later. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of things that we're still fighting for.
That's different. You said you were fighting for the same things.
Yes, some of the very same things we're fighting for.
That I agree with some of them, but not all of them.
Not all of them.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, certain things, there's been certain wins, but I think that there are a number of things that we're still looking at and we're still fighting for. And it's interesting. Well, one thing, which I've been screaming this since 2020, is this whole concept of voting rights for blacks. I think that we need to handle it, that it should not be something that has to be continually signed in, that we have these rights, but it should be, hey, we are Americans, you have the right to vote, and you never have to look at it again. Those kinds of things, what John Lewis was trying to do with his voting rights bill before his demise, are the kinds of things I'm saying we're still fighting for. This, we have the right, but we need to secure the right. And so even though there has been a lot of progress, let's put a nail in the coffin and just kind of secure that thing. So I was looking at this and going through, and the Scouts of America sent me down a rabbit hole, because I started thinking about, and these conversations are conversations that have been happening in Black spaces since the changing of, well, actually since middle of the summer. You know, what happens 2025, Project 2025, they're going to take us back 40 years, Project 2025. That has been the fear for many people in Black spaces of what they were anticipating would happen. And we were continually told that these things would not take place. But looking at that, so civil rights, affirmative action, DEI, essence, all have the same fight or the same mission for equality and equity. I think the terminology of equity coming into when we start talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion has been kind of a thing. Like, yes, okay, now we both can go buy that house, but now equity means that we have an understanding that for decades there's not been the ability to buy in this neighborhood. So what are we doing to provide opportunities and to promote opportunities for people in those spaces, or to ensure that there is some diversity in those spaces? And I think that is where we find the kickback or the pushback, because I think that everybody thinks that we should be equal and that we're all created equal. For the most part, I think all of America thinks that as American citizens, that the idea of equality among citizens is a very real thing. I think, and that's equality. So, but I think as we look at this generation who's, several decades removed from Jim Crow laws and a couple generations from slavery, we say, well, I never had a slave, so why should I? Equity means someone has to make space or give up space at a table to provide for the fact that when we were coming through the Boy Scouts, we weren't allowed to get our badges, or we were put through extra things in order to receive the same badges that other people's have had. And so now, and I think that's where, when we look for this idea of growing in America, that becomes the challenge, because nobody feels like, why should I have to give up anything when I did not participate in a system that existed before I did? And so I think that when we look at this and we go through these conversations, those are the challenges I think that Black America, Latino Americans, whomever Americans are going to experience in their desire to really find equal footing in the nation. Now, what I did find very interesting as I was looking, 76, when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, 76.1% of diversity officers were white women. And this was very true of affirmative action. The biggest benefactor of affirmative action processes were white women. And Department of Labor, that's where these statistics come
I would
from.
argue just women in general, irrespective of gender.
But white women. No, white women were the Department of Labor put these numbers out October of 2024. And you can go to subsequent years and find that the greatest benefactor of even affirmative action processes were white women. And I think that that's one of the things that it doesn't play out that way. 7.8% Hispanic, 3.8% Black, 54.5% of diversity officers, and I'm going to have a conversation if we can really quick,
yep,
were women, and 45.5% of diversity officers were men. So it's interesting that we come up with a system or a understanding of what something means, but the reality of what it actually happens is very different. Case in point, Mark, we had a conversation back in 2020. Tell me if you remember this. You guys were looking to do some things and to make some changes, and you were looking at the space of a diversity officer.
Mm-hmm.
And the candidates that came forth and the ones that were kind of like being strongly looked at You were like, wait a minute, I got a fundamental problem with this.
I don't remember exactly that conversation. I remember I don't think we had a male candidate. I think they were all women.
They were all women.
Yeah.
But do you remember one candidate that was that they thought would be the best candidate for this particular situation?
Well, there's a woman down in Detroit, I think.
Yeah, she was the best candidate. That
Well,
they thought
I just
nobody was bringing her from Detroit.
She wasn't going to stay was the issue.
Who's coming to the field?
She basically had just lost the jobs, was looking for a job, and I just didn't feel she was going to stay, and I felt like you needed to be a part of the community.
Yeah.
I do remember, again, I'm trying to recall the conversation. We ended up hiring someone, and there was this assumption by certain people that they were chosen because they were an ethnic minority versus a white woman.
Yeah.
And that was the only reason we chose her.
Yeah.
Which is, I basically kind of lit into him, obviously.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's the issue with kind of defined programs around quotas or saying, you know, we want a certain percentage of this kind of person, male, female, black, white. On one hand, I get it, and it's at times needed. On the other hand, it's the double-edged sword of like, then every minority that gets a job, there's the inherent assumption they got the job because they were a minority.
But I think there's that inherent assumption anyways, because that had been the philosophy for so long that we were not able to achieve. And so because of that, I think that there were a lot of minorities that were overlooked in these particular situations. So when we talk
I don't disagree. I mean, I don't disagree that did we probably need to do something to force some things? Yes, I'm going to cede that argument. At some point, though, that's to my point of like policies and things need to evolve as change takes hold. And at some point, you know, in theory, at some point, you shouldn't need any of this.
And no, absolutely. I would agree with you. That would be the hope.
That's where a lot of people are at this point.
Yes.
Is there's a feeling that it's become unnecessary.
Yeah. Right or wrong, that there is that feeling.
Well,
and so like
there's also a theory that black people are the ones that are getting all the jobs because they're unqualified, but because of quotas. I mean, if we were to be honest, the pervasive thought is that when we talk about affirmative action, when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we're talking about black people. Very rarely are we bringing to the account or that conversation of white women. Very, very rarely.
I would say it's ethnic minorities, black and Hispanic, not Asian. You have Asian on this list. I don't think anybody considers Asian a disadvantaged ethnic minority. I just don't think anyone's hiring an Asian because they go,
but yet the Department of Labor shows
that's just because they're an ethnic minority.
But this is what I'm saying, though. When we look at this and go ahead. I would
actually. I've seen more conversation when it comes to LGBTQ people.
Yeah, that's where I was going to go.
I think that's where kind of the emphasis has been in the last at least 2 years.
That I agree with 100%.
I would say that has become more pervasive. But when we look at the numbers, and this is what's interesting to me, is that we sometimes go by narratives that aren't necessarily real. So the highest benefit factors of diversity, equity, inclusion, white woman, followed by Hispanics. Thirdly, Asian Americans.
Get back to just, I want to make
But
sure
let me finish this.
All right, you finish your list.
Fourthly, vets are the disabled. Then 5 is the LGBTQ plus trans community, and coming in at a whopping number 6, Black Americans. So the narrative that's being painted about the achievement or how Black people are getting in is completely opposite, because there's
this I'd like to understand what this data is, to be perfectly honest, because like you've got this data below. Frankly, there's 50% more Hispanics than Blacks in this country, and you would if this is just by percentage or sheer numbers, you would expect there to be Hispanics to be second.
Well,
they're the second largest ethnic group in the country.
A part of that thing is, and I think, you were going to make a point, and I'll come back to it.
Well, I was just going to say, I don't think anyone's going, again, and maybe this is my unconscious bias.
Okay.
I've never heard anyone say, "Oh, I'm gonna look to hire an Asian because of a DEI program."
No, I don't. That's exactly what I am saying. I'm saying that the philosophy.
Whereas I have heard people say, I'm going to hire a woman because of a DEI program.
And what I am saying to you is this. That is the philosophy and the narrative that is being painted. but the reality of the situation is very different. So you don't hear those things. And I'll tell you, even before blacks, I wish we would have put the numbers in there separating African Americans, African descendants of slaves, which are African Americans from the U.S., African Americans, versus international blacks that come in. Because when we look at colleges, and I was looking at the numbers for colleges and university, they were the ones that were receiving the benefit of these affirmative programs.
Why do you think that is? You're African, black?
I'm black. I'm a black American.
Yeah. So African, black, of people of African descent or birth are receiving more benefit than. And why do you think that is? Because I went to grad school, and I can tell you for a fact, any grad school will take an American citizen over a foreign citizen anytime.
True. Not
yes,
true.
It is.
Not true.
Yep.
Not true. Not true
Okay.
at all.
Right.
I went to grad school as well, and I'll
right.
tell you, not true. We can have a feeling of something, but the reality of something, and the numbers don't say that. When we were looking at the practices of Harvard, we were a group that I'm a part of. We were looking at the admissions practices in Harvard and who were getting in, and it was not the regardless of how much we have put in, or blood, sweat, and tears. We talk about affirmative action. It was of the affirmative processes and actions and diversity, equity, and inclusion processes. They benefited international Africans over African Americans who were born in this country.
I'd like to see.
Statistically proven. We'll bring the numbers in.
I mean, because you would have to show me that a higher percentage of, and then you'd have to line up their credentials.
But if this were true, wouldn't that surprise you?
It would totally surprise me, because I have a PhD now. Granted, it was almost 40 years ago at this point.
Yeah.
But grad schools, at least in the world of engineering, were desperate for U.S. citizens.
Well, these are
they were filled with a lot of Asian, Chinese, especially grad students.
Yeah.
So
I think that this is important, because I think that there's a philosophy that exists, and these are conversations that we're having with the NAACP, conversations that the ACLU, all of these organizations are having based upon what we think versus what the reality of a situation is. And to this point, and looking at who's in our social media stream out there today, the interesting thing is that 71%.
See, I have a hard time believing that too.
71% of master's programs that are earned here in the United States are earned by Black women. Black women are the most educated portion of our nation's sector that exists. And it's, once again, we have hard times believing things based upon the narratives that are created. But when we look at the statistical data, and these are numbers that are coming,
I'm going to have to check that statistic.
I want you to check it out, because
that seems almost statistically impossible.
And this is why this is so important. These conversations are so important, because they allow us an opportunity to really talk data, to real talk situations that actually exist, and we're not living based upon soul narrative.
So I just found we've got a minute left from the National Center for Education Statistics. Black females are the highest master's degree earning demographic in the country. It's 14%. The next highest is 12.3%. It looks like, and we don't have time to get into
all of them. But I was kind of like, listen, we got to begin to have these conversations, because there's been a lot of narratives that have drafted policy, that have excluded policy, that have destroyed policy, like we see happening right now in our country. But when we get into the real data and the numbers, we see that there's something else going on. Those of you out there, if you're listening to us today, we want to certainly thank you for tuning in. We'll continue this conversation, because we really were having more fun than we were having real talk at the beginning. We'll start right into the conversation on next week. We want to thank you for tuning in to United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America. God bless you all. Grace and peace.